You know, when you stand on the street and look up at, like, a magnificent skyscraper, your eyes are naturally drawn to the
Oh,
aesthetics.
absolutely. The sheer glass panels, the steel beams.
Right. You see the sweeping architectural curves that define the skyline. You
Mm.
are taking in this brilliant, polished, finished product. And as a society, we applaud the architect. We marvel at the final result.
Oh, yeah, we celebrate the ambition of it. The finished building is a statement of intent.
Yeah.
It's a monument to the ideas of people who conceptualized it. It is entirely designed to be looked at and experienced.
But what you never really stop to look at, and what nobody ever writes a glowing review about, is the scaffolding that was there before the glass went up.
Mhm.
You never applaud the structural blueprints or the thousands of pages of incredibly dry, meticulous measurements, load-bearing calculations, material specifications, all of that.
No, nobody cares about the brackets.
Exactly. But those documents are the only things ensuring that the beautiful glass monument doesn't just collapse into a catastrophic pile of rubble the moment a strong wind blows.
It is the invisible architecture. I mean, if you are noticing the foundational math or the structural brackets while walking through the lobby,
That's a bad sign.
it usually means something has gone terribly structurally wrong.
And without that tedious invisible architecture, there is no building. There's just an idea of a building. Which brings us to the landscape of human knowledge, and specifically the blueprints that hold our collective scientific and academic endeavors together.
The scaffolding of science.
Right. If you are reading a brilliant research paper, a groundbreaking study, or a profound historical analysis, you are looking at the glass skyscraper. But today, we are taking a deep dive into the scaffolding.
And it is quite a dense scaffolding.
It is. We're looking at what is arguably the most notorious, seemingly tedious, and heavily scrutinized set of rules in the entire academic world. I'm talking about the formatting guidelines for reference lists,
Ah, yes.
specifically looking at the mechanics dictated by Chapter 9 of the APA-style publication manual.
I mean, just the mere mention of reference formatting is enough to trigger a visceral stress response for almost anyone who has ever had to write a research paper.
Oh, yeah, pure panic.
You can instantly picture the scenario, right? It's 2 in the morning, you've finished writing the actual content, and now you're just staring blankly at a screen.
Agonizing over whether a specific period needs to be italicized.
Exactly. The frantic searching, the panic over where a comma goes.
The absolute dread of losing a letter grade because you put a parenthesis in the wrong spot. But here's the thing, and this is our mission for you today. We want to prove that referencing is not just academic busywork.
It really isn't.
It's not some sadistic punishment devised by professors to make your life harder. It is, quite literally, the standardized global language that allows human beings and computers to track down the exact origins of an idea.
A highly structured, incredibly robust treasure map.
Yes, we have a massive stack of these guidelines right here, and we are going to extract the fascinating, surprisingly logical machinery operating behind all these rules.
Because the rules often feel arbitrary when you're just trying to memorize them from a textbook.
Oh, completely arbitrary.
But when you step back and look at the system as a whole, there is a profound logic at play. Especially when you consider how radically the landscape of information has evolved over the last couple of decades.
Yeah, the internet changed everything.
Right. The manual itself has had to fundamentally change its underlying philosophy just to keep up.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I think most people view referencing purely as a visual formatting chore. You know, you are just trying to make sure it looks right for the human grading the paper.
Right, the professor reading it.
Or the human reviewing the journal submission. But the current guidelines hint at a massive paradigm shift regarding who or what these references are actually for.
That is the core philosophical shift we have to understand before we look at any specific rules. Historically, a reference list was built for a human reader sitting in a physical library. You read a paper, you saw a book cited, and the reference list told you exactly which physical shelf in which physical building to walk to.
So go pull the book down.
Exactly. But today, the vast majority of references aren't just for human eyes anymore. They are built specifically for computer algorithms.
The machines are reading our reference lists.
They are parsing them, indexing them, and building networks out of them. Publishers use highly sophisticated computer algorithms to ingest these documents.
So they just scan the whole PDF.
Yeah, the algorithm's job is to read your text, find the in-text citations, link them to the reference list entries at the back of your document, and then, crucially, link those reference list entries out to the actual external works you are citing.
Wow.
This process creates massive, interconnected webs of indexing across the entire global internet.
It's like building a digital nervous system for human discovery.
That's a great way to put it.
So every time you format a reference correctly, you are firing a synapse that connects two separate pieces of knowledge.
And it goes further than just finding a document. These algorithms compile the lists of which works have cited which sources. This is how the academic world calculates impact factors.
Oh, so it's a metrics thing, too.
Exactly. It's how a researcher knows if their work is actually influencing the field. It is a massive automated accounting system for human intellectual progress.
So if you look at it from the perspective of the machine, accuracy and consistency aren't just about looking neat.
Not at all.
The guidelines explicitly warn that if your reference elements are out of order, or if they are incomplete, the algorithm might simply fail to recognize them as a citation at all.
Right. It just throws an error.
You miss a comma, or you swap the date and the author around, and you essentially break the machine's ability to index that specific node of knowledge. You sever the link in the chain.
It's totally lost.
Your work, or the brilliantly obscure paper you are trying to cite, becomes computationally invisible to the global network.
Which is a tragedy for the preservation of knowledge. A formatting error is no longer just a typo. It is a broken hyperlink in the global brain.
Geez, no pressure.
I know, right? The algorithms are smart, but they rely on predictability. They are looking for specific data points in a specific order, surrounded by specific punctuation marks that act as digital signposts.
That completely elevates the stakes. It's not about appeasing a strict professor. It's about ensuring we don't accidentally break the internet of knowledge.
Exactly.
So, to ensure we keep the machine running, we have to understand the foundational formula. Before we get into the bizarre edge cases of how to cite a random YouTube comment versus, like, a dusty old textbook from the 1800s, we need to establish the baseline.
The baseline is everything.
There is a core formula that applies to absolutely every piece of information on Earth, regardless of its medium.
It is the bedrock of the entire system.
Yeah.
Every single reference, whether it's a peer-reviewed medical journal or a map drawn on a napkin, generally has 4 elements.
Okay, 4 elements.
And these elements answer 4 very specific sequential questions.
The core 4. I like to think of this like a forensic investigation.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine you are a detective, and you walk onto a crime scene. You find a clue, let's say a strange handwritten note. If you want to log that into evidence so another detective can understand its relevance, you need to answer 4 fundamental questions to verify it.
Right.
First, you need to know who dropped it or created it. Second, when did they drop it? Third, what is this specific piece of evidence called? And fourth, exactly where can the jury go to find this exact item again?
The forensic analogy holds up perfectly. In the language of the guidelines, those 4 pillars are author, date, title, and source.
Author, date, title, source.
Who is responsible for this work? When was this work published? What is this work called? And where can I retrieve this work?
That's very logical.
It is. If you can answer those 4 questions, you can create a perfectly functional, machine-readable reference for absolutely anything, even if you encounter a completely new type of media tomorrow.
Like some VR experience or something?
Yeah, say a holographic projection published on a new blockchain. You don't need to panic or wait for a new rulebook. You just fall back on the core 4, author, date, title, source, in that exact unyielding order.
But let's face the messy reality of investigation, which is identical to the reality of research.
Yeah.
You don't always have a pristine crime scene.
Very true.
Sometimes you find a weapon, but the serial number is filed off. Sometimes you have missing information. You are working with an incomplete jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, the system actually has a highly engineered cascade of fallbacks for dealing with missing pieces.
Let's walk through some of these scenarios. Imagine you are a researcher and you find this incredible, vital document. You know exactly who wrote it, you know what the title is, and you have the physical document in your hand.
Okay.
But there is no date on it whatsoever, no copyright, no timestamp. What is the protocol?
So the system is designed not to break when data is missing, but to flag the absence of data clearly for the algorithm and the reader.
So you don't just leave a blank space.
No, definitely not. If the date is missing, you provide the author as usual. Then, in the parentheses where the year would normally sit, you insert a very specific abbreviation.
Which is?
ND, lowercase n, period, lowercase d, period. That stands for no date. Then you carry on with the title and the source.
Ah, so it's a placeholder. It tells the reader, I didn't just forget to look for the date. I am actively confirming that the date does not exist.
Exactly. You did your due diligence.
Okay, that's simple enough. But what if the who is missing? What if you find an amazing historical pamphlet, but there is no author listed anywhere?
This is where the structural flexibility of the core 4 really shines. If the author is entirely unknown, or if it cannot reasonably be determined by looking at the document or doing basic research, the entire structure shifts left.
Shifts left. What does that mean?
The title of the work slides over and actually takes over the author's position at the very front of the reference.
Wait, really?
Yes. So your entry starts with the title, followed by a period, then the date, then the source. The title essentially assumes the structural weight and responsibility of the author.
I have to push back on that logic.
Okay, why?
As a human reader trying to navigate a massive bibliography, putting the title in the author slot feels completely chaotic.
It can look a little strange, yeah.
If I'm scanning an alphabetical list of last names, Smith, Taylor, Williams, and suddenly there's a title like The Effects of Calcium, that breaks my visual flow. Why not just put the word anonymous in the author slot? Wouldn't that maintain the integrity of the who column?
That's a highly intuitive objection, and historically, some older formatting styles did rely heavily on the word anonymous.
Right, it seems easier.
But there are two major problems with that. First, from an alphabetizing perspective, if you use anonymous for every authorless work, you end up with a massive, useless clump of entries under the letter A. You'd have to sort through 50 anonymous entries to find the one you want. Second, and more importantly, the system requires accuracy regarding identity.
So you can't just guess.
Right. You only use the word anonymous as the author if the work literally signs itself with the word anonymous. If the author simply didn't put their name on it, declaring them anonymous is adding information that isn't actually there.
I see.
By moving the title to the front, the algorithm has a unique, identifying string of text to use as the primary sorting node, and it distributes those authorless works naturally throughout the alphabetical list based on their first significant word.
That makes a lot of sense. You are preserving the unique identity of the document rather than burying it in a generic folder.
Exactly.
Okay, let's turn the difficulty up. What if you have a document with no author and absolutely no date?
You combine the fallbacks, the system is modular.
Like stacking blocks.
Yep. The title moves to the very front, taking the author's place. Then, right after the title, you insert the ND in parentheses to account for the missing time element. Then you provide the source. You are just stacking the contingency plans.
Let's strip away even more. What if there is no title?
No title at all.
Yeah, I'm not talking about a book with a torn cover. I'm talking about finding a random photograph in a digital archive or a map that is just lines on a page. You have an author, you have a date, you have a link, but the creator never bothered to name the thing.
If there is no title, the rules require you to essentially step in and create a highly functional description of the work.
I get to name it.
Kinda. You write this description, and you place it in square brackets exactly where the title would normally go. For example, if you are citing that map without text, your title element becomes a bracketed statement, open square bracket, map showing the population density of the United States as of the year 2010, close square bracket.
I find that fascinating. You, the researcher, temporarily become the author of the title. But by using the square brackets, you are sending a very clear visual signal to the reader.
A very clear signal.
The brackets mean, hey, I made this description up so you know what this object is. Do not go searching a library catalog for this exact string of text because it is not an official title. It's a metadata tag you created.
Exactly. It's an injection of context. And the architecture holds even if we go to the absolute extreme.
The extreme.
Let's say you find a blank page with a charcoal drawing on it on some obscure website. There is no author, there is no date, and there is no title.
A total black hole of metadata.
Even then, the system doesn't collapse. You construct your bracketed description, say, open bracket, charcoal drawing of a horse, close bracket, and because there is no author, that bracketed description slides all the way to the first position.
Wow, so the bracketed description becomes the author, essentially.
It becomes a lead element. Then you put ND for the date.
Yeah.
And finally, you provide the source where you found it. You've answered the core 4 as best as reality allows.
You described what it is, you stated when it wasn't from, and you pointed to where it lives.
Exactly.
It is incredibly robust. It reminds me of biological systems that route around damage to keep functioning.
That's a really good analogy.
But there has to be a limit.
Right.
What about the final element? What if the where is missing?
Ah,
Let's say I am doing historical research and I am holding my great-grandfather's handwritten diary in my hand. It has an author, it has a date, it has a title, but it has never been published, it's not in a museum, it's not on the internet.
no source whatsoever.
Right. There is no way for you, the reader of my paper, to ever go retrieve it unless you break into my house.
This is where we hit the hard, uncompromising limit of the reference list. The rules are absolute on this point.
They kick it out.
They kick it out. The entire fundamental purpose of a reference list entry is to provide the exact information a reader needs to identify and retrieve the cited work. If there's no recoverable source, if the document is locked in your attic, it absolutely cannot go on the reference list.
Boom! It gets kicked out of the club. The machine rejects it.
It has to, because if the algorithm tries to build a link to your attic, the link goes nowhere.
The algorithm can't read physical paper in an attic.
Right. The chain of empirical verification is broken. The scientific method relies on reproducibility. If I can't look at the data you looked at, I can't verify your claims.
So what do you do with it? Just pretend it doesn't exist?
No. Works without a recoverable source become what the guidelines classify as a personal communication. You can still use the information. You just mention it directly in the text of your paper.
Oh, I see.
For example, you write, according to the unpublished diaries of my great-grandfather, but it does not earn an entry at the back of the paper.
That distinction really clarifies what the reference list actually is. It's not a bibliography of everything that influenced your thinking. It is a strictly curated map of public or at least commercially retrievable knowledge.
Precisely.
Now, to keep these four elements neatly separated, author, date, title, source, the system relies heavily on punctuation. And not just any punctuation, but very specific marks acting as structural guardrails.
Punctuation is the syntax of this machine language. You have to ensure that a period appears after each of the four reference elements.
After every single one.
Yes. You have the author element, followed by a period, then the date element in parentheses, followed by a period, then the title element, followed by a period, finally the source element, followed by a period.
So these periods act as hard, impenetrable stops between the distinct categories of data.
They are the firewalls.
The firewalls, I love that.
Yes, they tell the parsing algorithm, I have finished giving you the who, now prepare to receive the when. And within those elements, you use commas to group related pieces of information together.
Give me an example of that.
Well, you use a comma to separate an author's last name from their initials, or to separate a journal's name from its volume number. Commas group things internally. Periods separate the major architectural pillars.
And there's a wonderfully pedantic rule about italicizing punctuation that I want to highlight because it shows the extreme attention to detail here.
Oh, the italics rule.
Yes. If a punctuation mark naturally appears within an element that is supposed to be italicized, let's say you were citing a book and the book's title has a comma in it, that comma should also be italicized. It belongs to the title.
Right.
But you do not italicize the period that comes immediately after the book title.
Because that period does not belong to the book. That period belongs to the scaffolding system. It is the structural guardrail separating the what from the where.
It's like the period is the picture frame and the title is the painting. You wouldn't paint over the frame just because the canvas has blue on it. But there is one glaring, fascinating exception to these punctuation guardrails. And I think it is the absolute perfect example of old school print grammar, bowing down to the reality of the digital age.
It really is a massive shift.
You just said a period goes after every element, including the final source element. But what happens if the source element ends in a URL or a digital link?
You never, under any circumstances, place a period after a URL or a DOI in a reference list.
And this breaks centuries of traditional grammar. Every sentence, every thought, every list entry is supposed to end with a period. Why abandon it here?
Because it actively breaks the functionality of the internet.
How so?
In the era of print, a period at the end of the sentence was a visual cue for a human to stop reading. But in a digital document, like a PDF or a web page, a computer algorithm or a word processor is constantly scanning the text looking for hyperlinks.
Right.
If you put a grammatical period at the end of a web address, the software might read that period as part of the actual URL string.
Oh. So the reader clicks the link, the browser searches for a website that ends in .com article, and they instantly hit a 404-page not found error.
Yep.
The link is dead because of a punctuation mark.
Precisely. The logic of the machine overrides the ancient traditions of print grammar. If enforcing grammatical correctness destroys the retrievability of the knowledge, Grammar has to step aside.
That makes total sense.
It is the clearest indicator that the primary audience for these documents is no longer human eyes, but hyperlink clicking parsing engines.
That is just brilliant. It's the manual adapting to the environment it lives in.
Yeah,
Okay, so we've established the 4 structural pillars and their punctuation firewalls.
I have.
Now, I want to dive deep into the first and honestly the most philosophically complex element, the who authorship. Because in the modern world, especially the digital world, author is a remarkably loose term.
It really is.
It's not just a solitary genius sitting at a typewriter in a tweed jacket.
The definition of authorship has had to expand massively. In the context of a reference list, the author is simply defined as the person, persons, or group who holds primary responsibility for the creation of a work.
So it's about responsibility, not just writing.
Exactly.
That means the author could be the hosts of a podcast, right?
Yeah.
It could be the director of a documentary film. It could be the principal investigator of a massive government grant. Whoever shepherded the idea into existence is the author.
And this concept of responsibility has scaled up dramatically in recent decades, which brings us to one of the most visually striking and, frankly, political formatting rules in the entire system.
Oh, this is my favorite part.
The threshold between the 20-author rule and the 21 or more author rule.
Yes, let's get into this. So for a standard paper, the basic format is to invert all individual authors' names. You put the surname first, a comma, and then their initials. So Johnny Smith becomes Smith, J.A. And if there are a few authors, you use an ampersand, the and symbol, before the final author's name. But what happens when you have a paper written by a massive collaborative team?
The guidelines dictate a very specific cutoff point. You're required to provide the surnames and initials for up to and including 20 authors.
20.
Yes. If a paper has anywhere from 2 to 20 authors, you must list every single one of them in the reference list, typing out all their names and using an ampersand right before the 20th author.
That is an immense amount of typing for the researcher formatting the reference.
That's a lot of work.
And it takes up a lot of visual space on the page. But I understand the intent. Everyone gets credit. But what happens when there are 21 authors? Or 100? Because if you look at fields like high-energy physics, genetics, or climate science, papers don't just have 20 authors. They can have literally thousands of names attached to them.
Where work has 21 or more authors, the formatting rule drastically shifts. You do not list everyone.
So who gets cut?
Instead, you include the names of the first 19 authors exactly as they appear on the paper. Then, you insert an ellipsis.
There's 3 little consecutive dots.
Right, and immediately following the ellipsis, you add the name of the final author listed on the paper. You do not use an ampersand in this scenario.
So you have 19 names, 3 dots, and then the last name.
Exactly.
The visual representation of this is wild. But what I find truly fascinating here is what this purely typographical rule reveals about the current state of human collaboration.
What's fascinating here is that it is a direct reflection of the era of megascience. A century ago, a scientific breakthrough was usually a solitary pursuit, or maybe a mentor and their graduate student.
Like Marie Curie in her lab.
Right. But today, look at the Large Hadron Collider, where they discovered the Higgs boson. Look at the Human Genome Sequencing Consortiums, or the international panels on climate change. These projects require massive global infrastructures.
You have data analysts in Tokyo, hardware engineers in Geneva, theoretical physicists in Chicago.
Hundreds, sometimes thousands of people are genuinely deeply responsible for authoring a single paper. The reference style guidelines had to adapt to this new reality because the old rules were physically breaking down.
Right. Because if you faithfully list 3,000 authors in a reference list, that single reference entry would be longer than the actual 5-page research paper itself.
It would be ridiculous.
It would consume reams of paper in a printed journal and bloat digital files unnecessarily. So the ellipsis acts as a typographical bridge. It is a necessary compromise between giving credit to the massive team represented by the vanguard of the first 19 and the anchor of the very last one, and saving physical and digital space.
And notice the politics of who gets included.
Politics?
Well, yeah. The first 19 authors are typically the primary drivers of the research, the lead investigators, the people who drafted the text. The final author position, especially in the sciences, is often reserved for the senior principal investigator or the head of the laboratory that funded the research.
Oh, so the heavy hitters bookend the list.
Exactly. The people in the middle authors, 20 through 2,999, are the massive team of contributors. The ellipsis represents their collective effort. It is an acknowledgement that science is no longer a solitary pursuit. It is an industrial-scale operation.
I love that a simple punctuation mark carries so much sociological weight. And while we are talking about the quirks of naming, the rules have incredibly specific instructions for dealing with the messy, unpredictable reality of human identity.
Oh, human identity is very messy for algorithms.
For instance, what do you do when an author doesn't fit the first name, last name mold? What do you do with someone like Lady Gaga or a historical figure like Plato?
I think it's fantastic that figures like Lady Gaga are officially accounted for in the structural logic of academic formatting.
Me too.
The rule states that if an author has only one name, which applies to certain celebrities, pop stars, ancient Greek and Roman philosophers, or if they have an inseparable multi-part name that functions as an essential unified title like Malcolm X or Lady Gaga or Queen Elizabeth II, you provide their full name exactly as it is without any abbreviation.
So just to be absolutely clear, if I am citing an interview with Lady Gaga in a sociology paper about pop culture, I do not invert her name and write Gaga L.
Absolutely not. You write Lady Gaga, followed by a period. Plato is just Plato. Malcolm X is Malcolm X.
So you treat the entire moniker as an inseparable unit of identity.
Right. If you tried to force Lady Gaga into a traditional surname format, the algorithm and the human reader would be hopelessly confused. No one is searching an academic database for Gaga L.
It's an issue of retrievability again, but it's also a fundamental sign of respect for how the entity presents itself to the world. You do not mutilate an author's chosen identity just to satisfy a rigid column structure.
Exactly.
And this concept of respecting identity extends heavily into the digital realm too, doesn't it? What about usernames?
Oh, usernames are very common now.
If I'm writing a paper on modern political communication and I'm citing a tweet or an Instagram post from a prominent figure, but their handle is something completely disconnected from their real name, say, at ScienceNerd99.
The digital realm requires a dual identity approach. If both the author's real human name and their digital username are known, you provide the real name first in the standard inverted format.
Okay, so last name first.
Yes. Then, immediately following the real name, you provide their username enclosed in square brackets. And crucially, if the @ symbol, the @ sign, is part of how that username functions on the platform, you must include that symbol inside the brackets.
So let's visualize that. If John Smith is tweeting from that account, the entry would start Smith, J, space, open square bracket, at ScienceNerd99, close square bracket.
Exactly. And the logic here is beautifully elegant. By putting the real name first, it allows the reference to be properly sorted and grouped with all the other traditional scholarly works by Smith J in the alphabetical list.
Oh, that's smart.
The algorithm sees the real name and categorizes it correctly. But by including the exact digital handle in brackets, you are providing the precise technical string required to retrieve this specific piece of social media content. You are satisfying the demands of the alphabetical index and the demands of the digital search engine simultaneously.
And there is another level of respect for identity here that is vital for researchers to understand, which involves global and cultural naming practices.
This is huge.
The academic community is not a monolith, and the guidelines specify exactly how to handle naming conventions that don't follow the Western standard.
This is a critical point of cultural competency. Naming practices for the order of given names and surnames vary wildly depending on the culture.
Right.
In many Western cultures, the given name appears first, followed by the surname. We are deeply conditioned to assume the last word in a name is the family name. But in many Asian cultures, for example, the surname appears first, followed by the given name.
Let's use an example to ground this. Say you are reading a brilliant paper by a researcher from China named Zhang Yichen. If I'm an American undergraduate, my instinct is to look at that and assume Yichen is the last name, or the surname.
Right, and if you blindly follow that assumption, you would incorrectly format the reference as Yichen Z.
Which would be totally wrong.
Completely wrong. If that author traditionally publishes as Zhang Yichen, Zhang is actually their family surname. The overarching rule here is that you must adapt your formatting to align with the author's preferred presentation. You cannot force a Western first-name-last name assumption onto a global scholar.
But how does a researcher sitting in a library in Ohio know which part is the surname if they aren't familiar with the culture?
It requires you to do a little bit of actual research on the person you are citing. You don't just guess.
Right, you have to look them up.
You check the author's personal website, you look at their curriculum vitae, you look at how their name is formatted in the text of their previous publications. If their preferred professional footprint indicates that Zhang is the surname, then in your reference list, they are properly listed as Zhang YC.
Notice you kept the hyphen in the initials there.
Yes. If a given name is hyphenated, you retain the hyphen in the initials to accurately reflect the structure of the name. It shows a deep, meticulous respect for global diversity in the research community. We aren't just rearranging letters. We are honoring the cultural identity of the creator.
I think that is a profound takeaway. Proper referencing isn't just a technical skill, it's an ethical practice of giving accurate credit. Oh, before we move on from the who real quick, what if someone has a generational suffix, like junior or the third?
You use commas to separate the initials from the suffix. So the structure is surname, comma, initials, comma, junior, period. And if someone is credited with a specialized role, rather than just being a general author like the editor of an anthology, you specify that role in parentheses right after their name. You'd write ed for a single editor, or eds for multiple. If they directed a film, you write director. This clarifies exactly how they are responsible for the work you are citing.
Okay, so we have thoroughly investigated the who. We have mapped out the creator, whether it's a massive team of physicists, Lady Gaga, or an anonymous map maker.
We've got the who down.
Now we need to pin down the when and the what. We need to capture time, and we need to name the unnamed. Let's start with the date element. In a reference, the date refers to the date of publication. It sounds like the easiest part of the formula, but time can actually be incredibly slippery when you're trying to pin it down.
Time is rarely as simple as just grabbing a 4-digit year. The level of specificity required for the date depends entirely on the media you are citing.
What do you mean?
Sometimes the date is just a year, sometimes it's a year and a month. And for things that are published continuously, like a daily newspaper, a blog post, or a tweet, you need the exact year, month, and day.
And structurally, this date element is always enclosed in parentheses, followed by a period. So open parenthesis, 2020, close parenthesis, period. But I want to talk about a very common point of confusion for students and researchers. It happens constantly with books.
With a copyright issue.
Yes. You might have a textbook that hit the shelves in December of 2019. But if you flip to the copyright page, it says copyright 2020, which timeline do I follow? The physical release or the legal copyright?
For books, the rule is definitive. You always use the copyright date shown on the work's copyright page, even if it differs from the actual physical release date.
So ignore the release date.
Yes, the copyright date is the permanent legal anchor for that text. However, when you move to digital media, like web pages or news sites, the logic actually flips. You have to ensure the date you use applies specifically to the individual piece of content you are citing, not the website as a whole.
Right. You don't just scroll down to the very bottom of the website footer and copy the year next to the little copyright symbol.
Exactly, because that footer copyright date, say 2026, might just represent the last time the webmaster updated the site's overall design or terms of service. It does not mean the specific article you are reading was published in 2026.
The article might be from 2018.
Right. You need the date of the content itself. If the article has no date, you revert to our fallback and use ND.
That makes total sense. You are dating the knowledge, not the container holding the knowledge. But this brings us to the most philosophical, almost existential part of the date element. It's what I call the living document dilemma, and it involves something called retrieval dates.
Retrieval dates deal directly with the inherent impermanence of the internet.
Impermanence is a great word for it.
Most traditional online sources, like a published PDF of a journal article or a finalized news story, are considered stable. They are fixed in time. They are meant to change. For those static documents, you do not need to tell the reader when you looked at it.
But the internet isn't just static PDFs. Some things are inherently designed to change dynamically, day by day, or even minute by minute.
Exactly.
A Twitter profile page updates every time the user tweets. A dashboard tracking global weather patterns changes constantly. An online dictionary entry might be updated with new definitions.
Precisely. When you are citing an unarchived digital work that is likely or actively meant to change over time, you must provide a retrieval date in your reference entry.
How does that look?
You include it right before the URL. It looks like this. Retrieved October 11, 2020. From, and then the link.
I think of this like taking a Polaroid picture of a moving train. You are holding a snapshot of a very specific, fleeting moment in time. You have to tell the reader exactly when you snapped that picture, the retrieval date. Because if the reader goes to that same track, that same URL, tomorrow, the train will be in an entirely different location.
Or the cargo will have changed.
Or the train might be gone altogether. You are essentially swearing an oath saying, I promise you, on October 11th, at this exact moment, this is exactly what this page looked like.
It is a defense mechanism for your own academic credibility. If someone checks your source 6 months later and the data is completely different, your retrieval date proves that you weren't fabricating the data. The source itself shifted beneath your feet.
But there is a brilliant, totally unexpected exception to this rule about change in websites, and it involves Wikipedia. Wikipedia is the ultimate living document. It changes by the second. Anyone can edit it. So logic would dictate that every single Wikipedia citation absolutely requires a retrieval date, right?
You would think so, given how dynamic it is. But it doesn't.
Wait, really?
Why? Because the architects of Wikipedia built an incredibly robust system of archived versions behind the scenes. Every single time a user makes an edit to a Wikipedia page, the system automatically creates a permanent, stable link to that exact frozen version of the page. This is called a permalink.
So when you cite Wikipedia, you don't actually cite the live, constantly changing page. You click the Cite This Page tool, and you grab the permalink for the specific version you read on that specific day.
Exactly. Because that permalink points to an archived version that will remain stable forever, it is no longer a living, changing document. It is frozen.
Oh, that's amazing.
Therefore, a retrieval date is mathematically unnecessary. The train has been stopped, taken off the tracks, and placed permanently in a digital museum.
I love that. It is a massive institutional endorsement of Wikipedia's archiving infrastructure. It shows that the formatting guidelines aren't just reacting to the internet. They understand the back-end architecture of how the internet preserves data.
Okay, what if a work hasn't been published yet? What if you are citing a colleague's paper that has been accepted by a journal but hasn't actually gone to print?
In that case, you use the term in press in the parentheses instead of a year. It alerts the reader that the work exists and has passed peer review but is currently in the publication pipeline.
Ah, okay.
And if it's an advanced online publication where the journal posts the digital version before the physical issue is compiled, you use the year of that advanced publication. Okay, we know who made it and we know exactly when it existed in the timeline of human history. Now let's talk about the what, the title element. Now, typing out a title seems like it should be the most straightforward part of this entire process, but there is actually a highly sophisticated visual code operating here, specifically involving the use of italics.
There is a very specific visual logic to how titles are formatted, and it all revolves around identifying the relationship between different types of works. Titles essentially fall into two broad structural categories.
Which are?
Works that stand alone as independent entities and works that are part of a greater whole.
Give me a concrete example to separate those two.
A physical book, a standalone government report, a published dissertation, a feature film, or a complete television series. These are entities that stand alone. They're the complete package.
Yep.
So standalone works, the rule is that you italicize the title.
So if I'm citing the novel Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, the entire title is italicized.
Yes, it stands alone. But if you have a work that is fundamentally a smaller part nested inside a greater whole, like a single article inside a quarterly journal, or a specific chapter inside an edited textbook, or a single episode of a television series, the titles of those smaller nested works are not italicized.
Wait, I really want to emphasize this for anyone listening because it feels so counterintuitive. If I am citing a groundbreaking Nobel Prize-winning journal article, the title of that article is just normal plain text.
Correct. It is formatted in plain text. Furthermore, it is formatted in sentence case, meaning you only capitalize the first word of the title, the first word of any subtitle, and proper nouns. It is not italicized, and you do not put quotation marks around it.
That feels almost disrespectful somehow. We are so culturally trained to emphasize the titles of things we are reading. Why strip the formatting away from the specific thing I'm citing?
Because we connect this to the bigger picture of how a reader scans a document. The formatting is visually communicating a hierarchy. It shows the relationship between the container and the thing being contained.
The container.
Yes. When a reader or an algorithm rapidly scans down a reference list, their eye is naturally drawn to the italics. The italics act as a beacon. If a reader sees a plain text title followed immediately by an italicized journal name, their brain instantly decodes the relationship.
The plain text is a smaller piece nested inside the italicized larger container.
Exactly.
The container. That is such a helpful way to visualize it. The journal is the bucket. The article is the water inside the bucket. You italicize the bucket because the bucket is the structural entity you have to go find on the shelf. The italics always point the reader to the highest level container they need to search for.
Exactly. It's a navigational aid built directly into the typography. Now, what about extra technical information? What if you were citing the second edition of a textbook or volume 4 of an encyclopedia?
That information goes in parentheses immediately following the title, but before the period. And crucially, it is not italicized.
Right.
So you would have the italicized book title, followed by normal non-italicized parentheses containing second edit, and then the period.
Right, because you are conceptually separating the creative intellectual title of the work from the purely technical publishing specifications. The italics protect the creative title. The plain text delivers the specs.
Now, what about works that exist completely outside the traditional, peer-reviewed academic literature? Research today relies heavily on multimedia.
Heavily.
How do I cite a YouTube video or a piece of data analysis software or an audiobook and let the reader know exactly what they are clicking on so they aren't surprised when a video player pops up instead of a PDF?
This is where bracketed descriptions come into play. To help the reader identify the medium, you provide a concise description of the work, and you place it in square brackets immediately after the title, but before the period.
So you would have your title, and then in brackets you might write computer software or audiobook or video.
Exactly. So the reader has total situational awareness before they even interact with the source. They know they need to grab their headphones, not their reading glasses.
It manages expectations.
When formatting this, you capitalize the first letter of the description, but you do not italicize it.
Yeah.
It is considered metadata, supplementary information, not part of the core title itself.
And we touched on this briefly earlier with the map example, but if there is no title at all, the rules state that you just use that bracketed description as the title itself.
Yes.
You don't have a set of empty brackets followed by more brackets. The description simply graduates to become the de facto title.
Yes, and when you are forced to do that, you try to specify the medium right there in that primary description, so it becomes map showing the population density.
We have built a formidable structurally sound reference entry so far. We have the author, the date, and the title. We know who made it, when they made it, and exactly what it is.
We're almost there.
Now, we arrive at the final puzzle piece, the where. How does the listener actually go out into the world or onto the internet and find this specific thing? This brings us to the source element and the concept of the digital graveyard.
In a reference entry, the source is the set of instructions indicating where readers can retrieve the cited work. And just like we saw with the titles, the formatting of the source depends entirely on whether the work stands alone or is nested inside a greater whole container.
Let's start with the classic academic staple journal article. It is nested inside a greater whole. What does the source element look like for that?
The source for a journal article has two distinct parts. First, you have the periodical information, the title of the journal itself, the volume number, the issue number, and the page range where the article lives. Second, you have the digital locator, which is the DOI or the URL.
Okay, I want to look closely at the punctuation here because it is incredibly specific and it's where a lot of people make mistakes.
It is extremely picky, but again, for algorithmic reasons. You capitalize the title of the periodical using title case, and you italicize it. Then you place a comma. Then you provide the volume number, and you italicize that as well.
Wait, both are italicized?
Yes. However, the issue number, which comes immediately after the volume number with absolutely no space in between, is placed in parentheses and is not italicized. Then another comma, then the page range, which is also not italicized, then a period.
Let me visualize that structure. It would look like Journal of Psychology, comma, 54, open parenthesis 9, close parenthesis, comma, 1723-1734, period.
Perfect.
The italics start on the journal name and stop exactly after the volume number. Why, it's like a visual spotlight highlighting the most critical locating information for a librarian, leaving the highly specific granular details in plain text.
That's exactly how it functions. Now, contrast that with a standalone work, like a whole textbook. What is the source for a standalone work?
Well, historically, it used to be the publisher, and specifically the physical location of the publisher, right? Like, you had to write where the book was printed.
Yes, the source is the publisher. But here we arrive at a major, earth-shattering shift in the guidelines that reflects a profound change in the modern era. We no longer include publisher locations.
Rest in peace, New York and Y and London, England. You used to see those cities in every single bibliography.
It used to be absolutely mandatory to hunt down the city and state, or the city and country, of the publisher's headquarters. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of how information is distributed today, well, in an era of online-only publishers, globalized search engines, and massive multinational media conglomerates, physical location is completely irrelevant to the act of retrieving a document.
Right.
Knowing that a textbook was technically published by a company whose legal headquarters is in Boston doesn't help you find the book on Amazon or locate it in a university database any faster than just knowing the publisher's name is Penguin Random House.
It is a stunning admission by the academic establishment that the geography of knowledge is now entirely digital. The physical location of the printing press no longer matters. It has zero bearing on retrievability. The only exception I can think of would be works that are inherently physically tied to a specific geographic location, like a conference presentation.
Correct. The manual notes that for things like live conference presentations or symposiums, you do still include the location, the city, state, and country, because the physical gathering of human beings in that specific room was the original source of the event. But for published, distributed texts, the physical point of origin is considered dead data.
Okay, so the name of the publisher is the source. But wait, what if I don't buy the book? Or I don't subscribe to the journal? What if I access an article through a massive academic database like JSTOR or EBSCOhost? Do I list EBSCOhost as the source? They are the ones who gave me the PDF?
Generally, no. The guidelines state that database and archive information is seldom needed in a reference.
Why not?
Because the fundamental purpose of the reference is to provide the details a reader needs to perform their own search, not to force them to replicate the exact idiosyncratic path you took. An article might be simultaneously available on EBSCOhost, on ProQuest, and directly from the publisher's own website. The database is just the specific digital library you happen to walk into. It is not the actual publisher or owner of the work.
Plus, from a purely functional standpoint, URLs generated by library databases usually require a specific institutional login, or they use session-specific tokens that expire in an hour.
Exactly.
If I copy an EBSEX URL from my university account and put it in my paper, and you try to click it from your house, it will just hit a paywall or ask for my specific student password. The link is totally useless to you.
Exactly. It violates the core rule of retrievability. You only provide database names for works of extremely limited circulation that are exclusively available in that one specific database. For example, a proprietary systematic review in the Cochrane database, or a university's internal archive of student dissertations. In those rare cases, the database is the only publisher. Otherwise, you cite the original source, not the digital aggregator you used to find it.
This brings us to what I believe is the most important technological development in the history of digital referencing: the rise of the DOI.
Oh, absolutely.
Here is where the architecture gets really interesting. We all know what a URL is, a standard web link. But URLs suffer from a fatal flaw. They rot. Websites reorganize their folder structures, companies go bankrupt, and their servers get unplugged, pages get quietly deleted. It's a phenomenon called link rot.
It's a huge problem.
If you have ever tried to click a web link in a research paper from 2005, you know the absolute pain of link rot. Almost none of them work. So to combat this, the academic world created the DOI. What exactly is it?
DOI stands for Digital Object Identifier. It is now the final, most critical component of almost every modern reference list entry. A DOI is a unique, permanently assigned alphanumeric string that identifies a specific piece of digital content and provides a persistent, unbreakable link to its location on the internet.
Persistent, unbreakable. How can any link on the internet be unbreakable?
Because it operates on a completely different infrastructure than a standard URL. It's managed by a central global authority called the International DOI Foundation, utilizing registration agencies like Crossref. Think of a DOI like a digital fingerprint or a social security number for a document.
Okay.
A publisher registers an article and assigns it a DOI. Now, let's say 10 years later, that publisher completely changes their website architecture, or they go out of business and sell their entire archive to a different company. If that was a standard URL, the link would be dead.
Right.
But with a DOI, the publisher updates the new web address in the central DOI registry backend.
Sure.
So when a reader clicks the original DOI link in your 10-year-old paper, the registry intercepts it, looks up the current location, and instantly redirects the reader to the active page.
It's basically a permanent, globally mandated forwarding address for human knowledge. The document can move anywhere on the internet, but the DOI will always find it.
Exactly. It almost entirely solves the crisis of link rot for scholarly work. A DOI typically starts with the number 10, followed by a prefix assigned to the publishing organization, and a suffix assigned to the specific article.
And the manual has very clear instructions on how these should be visually presented. You present both DOIs and standard URLs as live clickable hyperlinks. They should always start with HTTP, HTTPS.
Yes. And because it is presented as a live, functional hyperlink, the manual explicitly states that it is no longer necessary to include the antiquated phrasing retrieved from or accessed from before the link. The presence of the hyperlink itself implies the act of retrieval.
That's more old school print baggage being thrown overboard. We used to have to explicitly write retrieved from HTTP because we were assuming someone was reading the paper on a printed page and typing the link into a browser manually. Now the link just sits there, doing its job autonomously. And as we discussed at length earlier, you never ever put a period at the end of it.
Never. Now, there is a practical issue with DOIs. Sometimes the suffix assigned by the publisher is incredibly long and complex.
Right. I've seen DOIs that look like a cat walked across a keyboard. They can be an entire paragraph of random, incomprehensible letters and numbers. It destroys the visual formatting of the page.
It does, which is why the system allows for the use of short DOIs. The International DOI Foundation provides an official service to mathematically shorten these massive strings, much like the commercial service Bitly, but officially sanctioned for academic DOIs. A specific work can only have one unique short DOI assigned to it, and it is perfectly acceptable to use that shortened version in your reference list to save space and make the document look significantly cleaner.
Okay, but let's face the grim, inevitable reality of the internet. We have to talk about the digital graveyard.
The graveyard.
Let's say I am citing a standard website, a blog or a news article. There's no DOI assigned to it, just a regular fragile URL. And right before I submit my dissertation, I do a final check, I click the link, and boom, 404 page not found. The link is completely dead, the website is gone, the server has been unplugged. What do I do?
As we established during our discussion on the diary in the attic, if there is absolutely no recoverable source, the document cannot remain in the reference list. It loses its status and gets demoted to a mere personal communication mentioned in the text.
But I don't want to lose a citation. It was a brilliant article, it perfectly supports my thesis, and I know for a fact that it existed.
And the manual doesn't want you to give up on it immediately either. The guidelines instruct researchers to make a concerted effort to resurrect the dead link before abandoning it. Specifically, you are instructed to search for the dead URL on the Internet Archive.
Yes, the Wayback Machine.
Exactly. The Wayback Machine continuously crawls the Internet, taking snapshots of web pages and saving them on their massive servers.
Oh.
If you plug your dead URL into the Wayback Machine and you find that they captured an archived version of the page back when it was still live, you are saved.
Oh, that's such a relief.
You simply use that archived Wayback Machine URL in your reference list instead of the dead original link. You are literally pointing your reader to the digital museum where the dead web page is permanently preserved.
It is exactly like finding a fossil. You can't show the reader the living, breathing dinosaur anymore, but you can point them to the exact, mathematically perfect imprint it left in the bedrock of the internet. I think it is a beautiful, elegant contingency plan for preserving the chain of knowledge when the original commercial host fails.
It really is. It demonstrates that these formatting rules are not just about arbitrary compliance. They are fundamentally about the long-term preservation of human thought.
Speaking of preservation and adaptability, we need to transition into the final phase of our deep dive. We have built the perfect standard reference. We know the core four, we know how to handle missing data, we know how to format titles, and we know how to navigate the digital graveyard.
But human knowledge is messy.
It doesn't all happen in English, it doesn't all happen in the 21st century, and eventually, all these diverse sources have to be organized into one giant, coherent list. Let's look at the edge cases, starting with crossing language barriers.
The scientific community is a global, interconnected network. Multilingual researchers frequently synthesize works published in languages other than the one they are currently writing in.
Sure.
Let's imagine you are writing a comprehensive literature review in English, but a foundational, critical piece of research you need to cite was originally researched and published entirely in Spanish.
Right. How do I format that entry so my English-speaking reader understands what the source is about, but I still accurately point the algorithm to the original Spanish document?
You utilize a dual language structure. You write the primary elements of the reference, the author, the date, the title, and the source, in the original language of publication. In this scenario, you write it in Spanish.
Okay.
But immediately following the Spanish title, before you place the period, you provide an English translation of that title, and you enclose it in square brackets.
Square brackets strike again. They really are the ultimate formatting tool for signaling, hey, I am adding helpful external context here that isn't part of the original document?
They are the universal symbol for researcher intervention. And the guidelines note that your translation inside those brackets does not have to be a rigid, perfectly literal, word-for-word translation. The goal is simply to give your readers a clear, accurate sense of what the work is fundamentally about.
So the structure is original Spanish title, space, open bracket, English translation, close bracket, period.
Exactly.
But what if we're dealing with something more complex than just a different language? What if it's an entirely different alphabet? What if I'm citing a demographic study published in Mandarin, or a historical text in Arabic, or a physics paper in Russian? I can't just type Cyrillic or Arabic characters into an English language reference list, can I? The algorithm would crash, right?
You actually have options here, and it reflects the growing technical capabilities of digital publishing. If the original language utilizes a non-Roman alphabet, the primary traditional recommendation is to transliterate the alphabet into the Roman alphabet.
Transliterate.
Yes, transliteration means you spell out the phonetic sounds of the original words using the standard letters A through Z.
Okay, so for Chinese, you would use the standard pinyin system to spell out the sounds using English letters.
Yes. That ensures the text is easily readable and sortable by standard English indexing algorithms. However, if transliteration is not possible, or if it would significantly degrade the meaning or searchability of the text, the current guidelines actually say it is acceptable to reproduce the original non-Roman alphabet directly in your reference list.
Wow, so I could theoretically have a line of actual Arabic script right in the middle of my bibliography.
You can. Modern word processors and digital publishing formats can handle Unicode characters without crashing. But if you choose to do that, you create a massive logistical nightmare for yourself. How do you alphabetize it?
Oh, right. If the list is A to Z, where does a character from the Arabic or Mandarin alphabet physically sit in that sequence? It doesn't have a letter.
Exactly. The manual acknowledges this complexity. It advises researchers to use their best judgment based on the context of the paper, or as a default fallback, to place the non-Roman entries at the very end of the English alphabetical list.
Okay, that works.
But regardless of whether you transliterate into A to Z or use the original script, the absolute unbreakable rule is that you must still provide that bracketed English translation of the title.
It always comes back to accessibility for the human reader. Now, what about the reverse scenario? What if I am reading an incredible French philosophy text, but I am reading an edition that has already been officially translated into English and published by an English press?
Yeah.
Do I still cite the French?
No. If you read the English translation, your reference list entry should be formatted entirely in English, because that translated physical book is the actual specific version you held in your hands and drew your quotes from.
Right.
However, you must credit the human who did the translating. You place the translator's name in parentheses immediately after the title, followed by the abbreviation translating.
And critically, to preserve the historical timeline, you must include the year of the original foreign language publication in parentheses at the very end of the entire reference entry. So the structure would look like author, year of the translation's publication, English title, translator name, trans source, original work published 1955.
Exactly. You are mathematically acknowledging the dual timeline of the work's existence, when the idea was born and when the translation you consumed was printed.
Which perfectly transitions us into the concept of actual historical time travel in references, republished and classical works. Let's say I am writing a psychology paper and I am citing a foundational book by Sigmund Freud. I went to the library and the specific physical copy I checked out is a beautiful newly printed edition from the year 2010, but obviously Freud wrote it decades before that.
You must provide the details of the specific physical or digital object you actually used. So that 2010 date goes into the main date element parentheses right after the author's name.
Okay.
But, just like with the translations, you must prevent historical confusion. At the very end of the reference, you add a parenthetical statement, original work, published 1922.
Because if you don't do that, a reader scanning your list might legitimately think, wait, was Freud publishing new books in 2010? Is he still alive?
Right. It protects the chronological integrity of the science. And this concept gets exponentially more complex when we deal with ancient, religious, and classical works. Think about the Bible, the Quran, ancient Greek texts like the Odyssey, or the plays of William Shakespeare.
These are texts that have been translated, republished, re-edited, and reprinted tens of thousands of times over hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. So how in the world do I cite a specific quote or passage? I can't just write page 42 because page 42 in my tiny paperback copy of Hamlet is going to feature a completely different scene than page number 2 in your massive hardcover annotated copy of Hamlet. The concept of a page number becomes totally meaningless.
This is where we see a brilliant universal structural adaptation. For these universally recognized religious and classical works, the guidelines instruct us to completely abandon the use of page numbers for locating specific passages.
Abandon them completely.
Yes. Instead, we use canonically numbered parts that are mathematically consistent across every single edition ever printed.
You're talking about books, chapters, verses, lines, and cantos.
Exactly. If you quote the Bible, you cite John 3.16.
Yep.
You do not cite page 844 of the Gideon Bible, because regardless of whether you are reading a 16th century King James manuscript or an app on your smartphone, the geographic coordinate John chapter 3 verse 16 will always take the reader to the exact same sentence.
Wow.
It is a universal, mathematically locatable coordinate system that entirely supersedes the physical layout of the page.
A universal coordinate system. I absolutely love that phrasing. It transcends the physical medium completely. And for dating these ancient texts, how do we handle centuries?
We use the standard academic abbreviations BCE, which stands for before the Common Era, and K, which stands for circa, used when a date is historically approximate. But interestingly, they specify that we do not need to use the abbreviation CE for dates in the Common Era. If a date lacks an abbreviation, the system assumes it is CE.
All right, we have reached the end of the line. We have gathered all of our diverse, complex, translated, ancient, and modern references. We have our massive stack of digital blueprints. Now, the final hurdle. How do we organize them?
The sorting.
Yes. We have to put them in order so the reader and the algorithm can actually navigate them. This brings us to the logic of alphabetizing.
The overarching standard rule seems incredibly simple. You organize the list in alphabetical order based on the surname of the first author of each work. A comes before B, B comes before C.
Right, simple enough.
But when you get into the microscopic weeds of specific, complex human names, the alphabetizing algorithm relies on a very strict, almost philosophical golden rule. Nothing precedes something.
Nothing precedes something. Okay, that sounds like a Zen cone. Spell the mechanics of that out for me.
It dictates that a shorter name will always come before a longer name that begins with the exact same sequence of letters. The classic example they provide to illustrate this is comparing the surname Loft, L-O-F-T, and the surname Loftus, L-O-F-T-U-S. Which one goes first?
I have to stop you there because as a human reader, that feels completely backwards.
Does it?
Yes. If I'm looking at Loft VH and Loftus EF, my brain wants to just mash the whole string of characters together. I see LOFTV versus LOFTU. Since U comes before V in the alphabet, my human intuition screams that Loftus should come first. Why force a rule that breaks human intuition?
Because you are thinking like a human who blends words together, not like an indexing algorithm reading ASCII characters.
Fair point.
The algorithm reads spaces as absolute boundaries. It evaluates the surname as an isolated unit before it ever looks at the initials. The surname Loft has 4 letters. After the T, there is a space. A space is a null value. It is nothing.
Okay.
The surname Loftus has those same 4 letters, but after the T, there is a U. It is something. Because the rule is nothing precedes something, the null value of the space after Loft wins the tiebreaker over the U in Loftus. Therefore, Loft is mathematically required to come first.
That is incredibly meticulous. It's literally sorting based on the mathematical value of a blank space. What about punctuation inside a last name? What if I have a researcher named O'Neill with an apostrophe, or McCallum with a capital letter in the middle, or a hyphenated name?
The algorithm is instructed to completely ignore them. You alphabetize the name as if the spaces, the apostrophes, and the hyphens simply do not exist. You strip away the punctuation and just read the raw letters straight through. O'Neill is processed simply as O-N-E-I-L.
Okay, one final scenario. What if I have a highly prolific author and I am citing 5 different papers written by the exact same person?
You must type out their full name, formatted correctly, in every single individual entry.
Every single time?
Every single time. In older historical formatting styles, there used to be a practice where you would write the author's name once, and then for subsequent entries by that same author, you would just draw a long horizontal line or dash to represent their name. It saved ink.
I've seen that in old books.
Right. But modern guidelines strictly forbid that. Every entry must stand alone as a complete, independent, machine-readable unit.
Because the algorithm needs to read the name every single time. It can't look up at the previous line and deduce, oh, there's a dash here, that must mean it's the same guy as above. The algorithm parses row by row, independently.
Yeah.
If there's a dash, it indexes the author as dash.
Precisely. You must feed the machine complete data every time. And to sort those multiple works by the same author, you simply order them chronologically by the year of publication, oldest to newest.
It all comes back to the machine.
It really does. Every single comma, every period acting as a firewall, every rule about spaces and italics, the fallbacks for missing dates. It is all meticulously engineered to create a frictionless environment for data extraction, preservation, and global indexing.
So let's step back and synthesize this journey we have been on today. We started with what looks, on the surface, like the most boring, pedantic list of visual formatting rules imaginable. A chore meant to torture students at 2 a.m. But what we have actually uncovered is a highly sophisticated, globally adaptable structural system. It is a system designed with one singular goal: to preserve the unbroken chain of human discovery. From an anonymous map maker in the 1800s to a fleeting tweet on a Tuesday afternoon, to a 3,000-person scientific mega-team discovering particles at the Large Hadron Collider, to an ancient philosopher like Plato whose words have survived millennia. This system has the architectural capacity to capture them all, standardize their metadata, and hardwire them into the permanent global network of knowledge.
It is the great structural equalizer of information. A YouTube video and a Nobel Prize-winning medical breakthrough are subjected to the exact same core 4 elements. They are held to the exact same rigorous standard of empirical retrievability.
So what does this all mean for you? The next time you are staring at a blinking cursor, desperately trying to figure out if a parenthesis goes inside or outside a period, I want you to remember this. You aren't just following a pedantic rulebook to avoid losing points on a grading rubric. You're actively participating in a vast, interconnected network of knowledge preservation.
That's right.
You are laying down the blueprints. You are building the invisible architecture so that someone else or some algorithm can come along 50 years from now, follow your exact steps, verify your truth, and use your foundation to build the next floor of the skyscraper. You are the one keeping the internet of knowledge alive and functional.
That is exactly the mindset to have. And if we look to the future, we know this system will have to continue adapting. We've seen how it evolved to drop physical publisher locations because geography became irrelevant, and how it embraced DOIs as the permanent digital fingerprints for a new era. It adapted to megascience with the ellipsis.
It's always changing.
But here is a provocative thought to leave you with. As we rapidly enter an era where artificial intelligence can synthesize massive amounts of data, run experiments, and generate highly original insights without a traditional human creator, how will the who element of our reference lists have to adapt next? When the algorithm transitions from merely reading the reference list to actively authoring the science, how will the blueprint have to change to accommodate a non-human mind?
And that takes us right back to the beginning. We're looking at the skyline, but the scaffolding is about to get very, very interesting.